Psychologists and psychiatrists viewed the NGI defense differently. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes. Psychiatrists would usually see the patient when they have gone to jail after committing an act, and somebody would suggest that they were not well or insane at the point. Um, there were differences in assessments, and at the point before I was writing my dissertation, you could have either a psychologist or a psychiatrist do the interview. I actually examined numerous reports from both psychiatrists and psychologists. The difference that I noticed was that the psychologists would refer to personality testing, like any number of personality tests, which are very interesting, but it tells you more about the personality, as it says, than about the actual act of violence. The psychiatrists would deal with how did you feel maybe the day before and during the time when you were committing this crime, without actually going back to, who, how this came out of your personality. Like, in a way, they were more concise, because as we found in psychology, that your background and the tests may say one thing, but you may live your entire life on a very different road. The other difference that was really noticeable was if the defense hired a psychologist or a psychiatrist, they were not as trustworthy, because they had a horse in the race, because they were saying, number one, he is not guilty because he did such and such. And some of these psychiatrists and psychologists were being paid large amounts of money by the defense attorney, where the court-appointed psychiatrists gave their reports directly to the judge. The judge then had to interpret what was really happening to this person. And usually the judges would have several psychiatrists do these interviews, and often if several disagreed with each other, which I actually never ran across, but I heard that this does happen, and when they disagreed, often a psychologist would be brought in to give a report. One thing that I noticed was usually the psychiatrist's report would be maybe 2 pages. The psychologist reports could be 6 to 10 pages, based on a number of tests that were given to them.
Did you notice any way that the court would view psychology versus psychiatry?
Yes, I had the feeling that psychology was kind of used as a basis for how could this happen, where psychiatrists' reports were used more as why did this happen, and is it possible that this could happen again? And again, this was, I thought, very difficult to ask somebody. This, let's say, 40-year-old man has never had any problems, and he shot his neighbor because he picked a cherry off his tree. Okay, how can either a psychiatrist or a psychologist actually tell, could he do something like that again? And of course, if the psychiatrist said, he's fine and this will never happen again, and it happens again, that's a legal issue.
How did lawyers deal with psychology and psychiatry?
During the time that I was doing my investigating, there were some lawyers, if you saw their name, you already knew that they would hire somebody for the defense, rather than waiting for the judge to make the decision based on the report that was given to the judge. it was kind of in my community almost like a standing joke of if this lawyer has something to do with the defense, it's a bought defense.
And did the court try to appoint people that had a reputation to be impartial?
Yes, the court had a list of psychiatrists that were consistent. In other words, they had a list of, at the time that I investigated in some courts, of 6 psychiatrists, that maybe they would pick 3, and another time 3 others, and another time 3 others, that were very much of the same opinion. In other words, it was like a medical decision that carried more weight than if you brought in different ones. You kind of, the law was at that point very difficult to interpret. I'm not going to go into that law, which was during the time that I was doing my investigation, but it is available in my thesis.
Do psychologists today have any special training in NGI?
There is no special training other than standardized tests based on kind of outcome related and going backwards from it. But there are, the psychological tests are so numerous that depending on which test you apply, you will get more of a picture of what made the person this way rather than why did he act in that specific instance a certain way.
So psychologists use basically standard tests to answer this question.
Correct.
And do psychiatrists have any specialized training in this area?
In training, I'm not sure what is being taught now, but during the time that I was investigating those reports, there was no special training. However, the ones that had done it for years and were familiar with the law that was being applied, they were able to speak to that law very adequately, contrary to some psychiatrists that would come in without understanding the law, because the meaning of NGI is very difficult to understand.
Thank you very much.